Consulting LLC. He advises clients on energy, healthcare, education, economic development, and other issues. Provides strategic policy advice on a wide range of clients dealing with issues with the nation's governors, the state level cabinet agencies. He's assisting clients on matters in all 50 states and regularly works with clients having matters with the National Governors Association and a number of other associations. As a governor of South Carolina, he led efforts to improve the state's education system, including establishing the education lottery, and is credited with providing more than 100,000 scholarships. He's also responsible for funding First Steps, a private public preschool readiness program. Jim received his law degree at the University of South Carolina, as well as undergraduate in business administration at the University of South Carolina. He's received honorary doctorate degrees from the University of South Carolina, South Carolina State, the Citadel, Winthrop, Francis Marion. I could go on and on, obviously. He's got a great background. If you would, please join me in welcoming former Governor Jim Hodges.
Well, good afternoon, I guess. I was going to say good morning. Great to be here and to see you all. We've got a ball game this afternoon, right? How many people are going? Great, me too. So I'm not going to keep you too long because we've all got to get it. It really is terrific to be here and spend a few minutes with you. I'm going to talk for probably 10 or 15 minutes, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Roland will appreciate this. As a former public servant, particularly if you've been out like I have for well over a decade, you have people that recognize you from time to time. And I found that that's when, over time, that changes a bit. Early on, it was, didn't you used to be somebody important? That was the question that I would get. And the next one was, didn't you used to be Jim Hodges? That was actually the question I got. I think I still am. But one of my favorites about misidentifying what you do and who you are was, I was in Toronto, actually, from Toronto here, giving a speech for a client, and this was at the height of shall we say, a problem that my successor had with his marital life. And the person with the company that I worked with, we were speaking to a group of a couple hundred people all from Canada, and said, before you get up, you need to explain something to the group here. And I said, what's that? I said, you're not the guy that went to Argentina. I said, this true story. I said, you're kidding me. They know about that? And she said, oh yes, they've been following all that. So I got up to make my remarks, and I said, I have been asked to tell you that I am not the governor from South Carolina that went to Argentina. I said, my girlfriend lives in Brazil. Of course, I reassured all of them and told them, whatever you do, I'm going to tell my wife I told that joke. So, it is terrific to be here and to talk a little bit about where we are as a state. And I do want to talk about, Phil, I wanted to talk about a project that a group of us have launched. Several former governors, former Speaker of the House, a group of business leaders on higher education, which Columbia obviously is a big higher education community, and I think you might be interested in some of the things that we have found that connect the workforce, and then some of the things that we hope we will be able to do as a state, hopefully from this project. It's been a lot of fun, and we've had a good time getting together and talking about that. Well, where are we economically? I'm probably not telling you that you don't already know. In South Carolina, things have gotten better on the unemployment front. We've continued to see a gradual reduction in the unemployment rate from a point where we were well above the national average to the point that we are below that now. That's certainly the good news on the economic front. It's probably not all that surprising if you look at the mix of employment in South Carolina. We're a big manufacturing state. And as you emerge from recessions, the first thing that comes back tends to be manufacturing. And you see states like South Carolina and Indiana and a handful of others that generally lead the way in terms of new employment when things are getting better. And we saw that when there was a bit of a recovery, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, and then we're seeing that again where our numbers actually look a little bit better than North Carolina's and some other states. And a lot of that relates to where we are in the economic cycle and also the mix of jobs we have. We're obviously a big manufacturing state, and have a heavy investment there. It's something we've all been proud of in our state, and you tend to see those results when economic activity improves. So I think that's the good news. We are, we've made some progress. As a country, we've made some progress, a lot slower, I think, than any of us wish were the case. But we do have some challenges ahead of us. I think both here and elsewhere. Someone asked me a couple of weeks ago what I thought the biggest challenge that we faced was, and I don't think that this is dramatically different than any other state. It really is lack of wage growth. If you look at the last 3 or 4 years in particular, if you're a shareholder, you've done pretty well. And your stock market's up. Things have been pretty good in the stock market. There's been steady appreciation. If you are a corporation, you've done pretty well. The borrowing costs are low, and as a result of that, you've been able to make money, and that's been reflected in the share prices. If you are a wage earner, though, you've not done quite as well. We've had nationally a real stagnation in wages. If you look at the past decade, we've not been able to recover, and that's been a trend. Some of that, obviously, is a result of the fact that the labor markets have been kind of weak, and as a result of that, people not had to be paid more, but some of it relates to skill levels in the workforce and some problems that I think we need to address in trying to get ourselves in a better position to take advantage of high-paying jobs. As many of you know, many of you are in business, and many of you talk to people in business, there are many areas where we don't have enough workers that pay very well. I was with a friend and a client last night who employs welders, and he simply can't get enough people to do welding work. And he was going through the math of what they pay for welders, and it was well over $100,000 a year for the work that's done. And he says, we can't find enough people who meet the screens and who have the training to be able to do this. And any of you who use computer people, another example, a client of mine in Missouri that I was with a few weeks ago was telling the story about, and he's in Columbia, Missouri. We can't find enough people, even in a college town, who are finishing the programs in computer science. We can't find enough people to be able to do the things that we have. And we've talked about the struggles in smaller communities of being able to find folks for those jobs. So I think that is, one of our real challenges is the lack of wage growth that we've seen, which means lack of buying power over time. The other is the skill level of our workforce both here and nationally, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But I think those are a couple of real problems that we have as a state and a nation trying to address those problems. I think we have reason to be optimistic, but those are some big issues that we have that we've got to overcome. Now, let me talk about higher education for a minute and tell you sort of how we got here and what we found and what our group thinks it will do. My predecessor, David Beasley, is involved in this. I am former Speaker David Wilkins, as a couple of college presidents who were appointed by the presidents. Ray Greenberg, who was at Medical University, was a part of this. Sonny White at Midlands Tech. Fred Carter, who's the president of Francis Marion, and a group of really good, David Hancock, and a group of really outstanding business leaders were probably part of this. And we came together because as we looked around, we were distressed at a few things. One was that when you look at funding levels for higher education in South Carolina, we're about 7 or 8%. The general fund contributes about 7 or 8% of the higher education budget, and that's well down from where it was. At one point, I think it was probably well over 30%, and now it's about 8% of the state budget. So what happens, what do you think happens when funding is reduced to 8%? Well, something's got to give, and that something's got to give is tuition. And we have fought very hard to try to keep tuition at reasonable levels here in the state because we feel like that, the higher education investment is so important for people's future. So we started sort of looking at that issue and trying to probe, what the issues were there, and we continue to do work on that. But the first thing that we did was we took a look at where we need to be as a state. how many people do we have that have associate degrees or some college or have finished a certificate program or have a bachelor's degree or better? And how many do we think we're going to need by the year 2030? That's the sort of a marker we used. So where are we now and what do we need by 2030? And can we assess this and figure out what we're going to need and then determine how short we are from those numbers and what economic impact that has on the state? So we were able to get two economists at Carolina, Doug Woodward and Joey Von Nessen, who are both terrific research economists. And we said, here's the challenge for you. Take a look at where we are as a state and our workforce and where we need to be by 2030 and help us quantify how many jobs that is. And let's take a look at the normal replacement rate, people coming out of high school or college, and the growth factors that you anticipate. So here's the net result of that study. It showed that with normal replacement rates, that between now and the year 2030, that we're going to have to produce 110,000, actually it's 114,000 more people with 2- and 4-year degrees in our state just to be able to satisfy what the anticipated labor needs are. And that's over and above what we're normally doing right now. That's 114,000 more people. You know, take a wild guess at where many of them, what field do you think many of them are going to be in?
Service.
Service, but specifically what kind of service for people in my age range and older, do you think? Healthcare, yeah. Certainly service and healthcare. It was like we have a shortage of around 40,000 people in the healthcare industry alone. Nurses, various forms of home health, because of the aging population. Present company excluded, of course. But about 40,000 in that area alone. Management, business, STEM-related work, IT. You go through the long list, but it was alarming to us that, you know, that's 2030 is not a long way away, and that we're, you know, 114,000 people short of where we need to be. And so when you look at those numbers, if you do the simple math on that, we ask ourselves, if we were able to just get ourselves up to the point that we address what we know is our workforce need, and this project does not assume that we have another Boeing or another BMW. It's just that steady increase as a result of what our economy will naturally generate. And we, you know, about every decade we've had a Boeing or a BMW come here. Well, if you look at that, and if we were able to get up to that level where we met that 114,000 need, we not only would be able to put ourselves in a position to gain a lot of new jobs and both new industry, but also growth from our current industry. But the economic impact was in the multi-billions of dollars, and that's in additional tax revenue, that's in living standards as a result of that. I mean, you all sort of know the math on how much more you will make in your lifetime if you have a certificate or a 2- or 4-year degree. The numbers go up. And that's still, despite all the worries about kids with English degrees, which is my older son who's getting ready to finish college, the truth is that the one factor that most affects how someone will do economically is whether or not they have a degree. Still is. Regardless of what that degree is, it still is the most significant factor in whether or not people are going to achieve and whether or not they're going to be able to make money to support themselves and support their families. So if you look at the monetary value of this project, or I should say the monetary value created by being able to meet those demands, it's in the multi-billions of dollars for the state if we're able to affect that and indeed be able to develop a plan. Now moving forward from that, and we've got, if you're interested in this, I can give you the citation. The project's called Competing Through Knowledge, and that entire economic study is on our website. If you want to take a look at it, it's a pretty interesting thing to do, to see where those numbers are, where they are, what they are, and what impact it will have on the state. Now, what are we going to do as a result of that? So we've got this nice study out there, and we're kind of in the process of finalizing our ideas. But I'll tell you that there are probably 3 or 4 categories that we'd like to focus on. One is increased funding for higher education, and that's all of it. That's not, what we have found is in the past that there has been this wrestling match Roland, you'll appreciate this, in the legislature for individual institutions. You know, if you're Midlands Tech, you're focused on Midlands Tech. If you're a Carolina person, it's Carolina. Clemson, it's all about getting something from my institution. There's been no real collective look at the things that we need to do systematically for 2 and 4 year education. You know, can we not come together with some concepts, some ideas that will help improve higher education overall for South Carolina? That's the general idea, and I think we'll have to look at some funding questions about that, because when you go from 30 to 8% or whatever the top line number was before, there clearly are some challenges, and you got to figure out how you allocate that, but more importantly, come up with some long-term strategy that can make a difference. Second is the economic development role of higher education. In every study that I've seen in every community that I've been in over the past 25 years, what you would see is those that have a higher education institution have a distinct advantage over those that do not. And here in Columbia, it makes a huge difference that we have multiple institutions and one that's a research university. We need to do a better job of looking at aligning our economic development strategies around the presence of an institution like USC here in Columbia, and having them play a more active role. And also engaging people like you, business leaders, with them to discuss what your and what the community's economic needs are. Where are the areas that we need to be producing more graduates? And having that continual conversation with the institutions that we have here. Trying to better align what higher ed does with what the economic needs are of the community and what workforce needs are going to be. And that, I think, has been lacking to some degree. Clearly, these institutions are real economic engines. They're great job creators for us, and we need to do a better job of taking advantage of that. We also think that when you look at things that hold regions together, there often is a university or an institution. In the PD, it's Francis Marion. Here, it's the University of South Carolina. In the upstate, it's Clemson. You look at each region, and they're very important institutions that often are honest brokers. They facilitate. They have the ability to bring people together who may have different political views or different community interests. But these institutions have a way of bringing people together to solve problems that sometimes you don't have. And our view is that there are important functions that these universities can and do play that need to be enhanced in trying to address the problems we face as a state, whether it's health care or education or any other issue out there. So those are a few things that we have identified that we think are critically important. The key is identifying what we need, and I think we've done that. Coming up with a plan to get there. How do we attain this 115,000 job goal? And having a plan in place that has periodic tests to see how well we've done. So those are the things that we hope to achieve. We hope to bring everybody together to try to make that happen, to get all the institutions on the same page. But the most important element of this, we're convinced, is that this initiative has to be business-led. I don't want to say that the institutions don't have credibility. I think they do. But, you know, it's one thing if college presidents are going to the legislature or anyone else and saying, here's what I need. It's another when an independent group or citizens groups take a look at these same issues and reach conclusions about where we want to be as a state. And then we together form a policy and develop a plan that we want to stick with for 16 or 18 years. I mean, it's dramatically different when that happens. And our belief is that we ought to come up with a series of ideas, that we ought to publish those, that we ought to have a robust discussion about that, and see if we as a state, particularly those of us, all of us that are in the business world, can come up with a plan that we want to buy in on, and then try to see if that can affect state policy, both short and long term. If we are successful, we can do incredible things as a state. Because I think we all, regardless of your party identification, I think we all agree that higher education is incredibly important, that greater education attainments are incredibly important for us. Now, finally, just a word about why we're doing this. One of the reasons we chose to do it is because there have been lots of efforts on the public ed front, and there are a lot of good things going on now to try to make sure we do a better job from pre-K through 12th grade. Great things, and they continue. But if you think about it, the things we do with a preschool child are going to take how many years? 12, 13, 15 before you see any impact. The things that we do with a middle schooler to deal with remediation may or may not have an impact, but it's going to take a while. If we can do something at college level, do a better job of taking people that have dropped out and working with them to make sure they complete the degree, a better job of taking people that could finish a certificate program and finding a way to make sure that they actually do that. You think about the positive impact we can have. I describe it as low-hanging fruit. When you look at the things that we can do at the college system to try to improve things, and we'll get an immediate financial dividend as a state from that, and individuals will get an immediate dividend as well. So that's why we're focused on that. I think it's a great project that you look at the political beliefs of the group that we have involved in, they go from left to right. But everyone seems to agree on this, that this is a critical priority for us, that if we really want, if the things that we think we're capable of doing as a state, we've got incredible assets here, both geographic and the labor situation here is very good. We have really hardworking people. If there's one thing we're missing in all of this, I think it's that we need to get our educational attainment levels up as a state. And our hope is that with some plan and with a dedicated effort to try to follow that we can do this and reap substantial dividends for a long time to come. So that's my pitch about the Competing Through Knowledge project. I think you'll read more about it in the months to come. I think it's a terrific project that we have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about this or anything else that you might have. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Governor Hodges, sometime probably 15 or 20 years ago, I heard Ike McLeese talk about something similar to what you're talking about. And part of what he said was that if you looked at the three groups, one being unskilled, and that's a pretty large percentage of people in our state, and the second being skilled, and the third being college educated, college degree, that the unskilled had a really hard time getting jobs. And we had too many of them, but even his contention at that time was that the college educated, also we had too many of those. They were having a hard time getting a job, but we didn't have nearly enough people that were skilled, coming. And one of the things you mentioned, Midlands Tech, that we've got a tremendously strong technical education operation here. I don't know what the solution is, except maybe get those unskilled people to learn how to, to graduate from high school and then go further. Maybe not push them into college if that's not the right thing.
Oh, I think there always will be a need. In fact, part of what we found when you look at this, all of the studies, is that a little over half, probably 52% of the new jobs that will be created will require, I think the number was 52%, some level of college. But it still makes it 48% that will fall into that unskilled category. Certainly is going to continue. There will always be a need for unskilled labor. But I think what we're finding is that you simply look at the industries that we all dealt with. I grew up in a textile town, and those jobs went from, it took me 2 weeks to train to run a set of cards in a card room in a textile mill, and I've made the same wage that people that have been working there 30 years did. But those jobs are gone now. And more of the things that are coming out, I guess what's different than when Ike may have made that speech is that the level of training that's required for people to do manufacturing-related work now is much higher than it was. Now, sometimes that's simply skilled labor that doesn't require college, but oftentimes with the computerization, it requires either a certificate or at least a 2-year degree. So I think what you're saying is right, that there definitely are going to continue to be categories, but there is always a demand. When we talk about liberal arts, for instance, there's plenty of, we all understand the science and math and jobs that have science and math skills and very technical things like welding, but there's still always a demand for people with good reasoning skills, and if any of you have hired lately, you get very frustrated by communication skills that some people that are recent college grads have, and you wonder how much of that's actually taught. There's always going to be a demand for people that can, reason well, think well, write well, speak well, I think. So I believe that as you look at advanced manufacturing, it's changed a lot in the last decade, and it'll change more, which will require more knowledge and probably greater numbers of degrees.
I think his point wasn't to give jobs for the unskilled, but give skills for the unskilled, and that comes through the education.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. And I think it is more critical now than ever, because the people that could get out of high school that could learn on the job, is harder to do that now with some of the advanced manufacturing pieces of work. And those are the things that we want to go for, because we all recognize that the sort of lower manufacturing skill things are all going offshore. And if we get them, I think one of my frustrations as governor was that you really had to have a couple of strategies. If you were not picking on Marion County, but if you had some jobs in Marion County, I remember one project specifically, you weren't really creating 30-year strategies where you were bringing an industry in that you hoped could stay for 30 years and be a vital part of the community. You were looking at 5-year strategies. And sometimes it was to take people who were 50 who had lost a job in the textile industry and hope you could get them to 60, where they'd get closer to Social Security. And this is one of the dynamics, I think, of South Carolina, is we've got very thriving metropolitan areas, but we still have a substantial piece of our state that is poor and that has lower educational levels and has minimal economic opportunities in the future, unless we can do something about the skill level and the educational level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes?
What are your thoughts on some of the recent last couple of years changes within the university structure, where Pasadena basically carved out Bill Kirkland into economic development? Has that been something that you're tracking with? I mean, is that positive from your perspective? Or?
I know him, I've not followed specifically the work that he's doing there. I've met with him a couple of times, not about this project. I think it's good for a couple of reasons. One is that there's an awful lot of, as you know, there's a lot of patents that the universities have that have economic potential, and we've also seen it with other institutions, places like Georgia Tech in Atlanta and Clemson, that there are a lot of great things that can happen if you find a way to take those concepts and make them into something that's economically viable. To me, the problem the institutions have had historically has been a difficulty in financing things, the ideas, and also sometimes scientists fall in love with science, and maybe it doesn't have the economic viability that they think it might, and then picking the right projects is, I think, been more challenging. So in fact, part of what we talk about in this study is a need to try to get business people more engaged on these economic development opportunities with the institution, so that they can provide the sort of feedback that they need and help them more in identifying the areas of university research that they think might have some sizzle in the economy. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's a great thing to do, and I believe they should play a greater role in economic development. And I think there are a lot of things they're doing now that probably could result in job creating opportunities.
I know that's their intent long term.
Yeah, I think it makes plenty of sense that they would want to do that. And when you look at the cuts in state funding, it creates more incentive for them to continue to find things that they can keep some sort of equity stake in and hope that it produces some revenue. Yes, sir.
Governor, what comes first, the acquisition of new industry to a state, or the number of trained or trainable people already present in that area?
That's the chicken or egg thing. I think either would be a great problem to have. I have always believed that the more skilled labor you have, the jobs are going to follow. I mean, because skilled labor is in such a demand now, there's such a premium on it that there's so many good opportunities out there that I always found when companies would come in to talk to us, that they focused on skilled labor. And I'll never forget a conversation I had with one of the pharmaceuticals about trying to get them to locate a large project here. And the comment was that we would put a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility in this particular community in South Carolina, but we wouldn't put a research facility. And the reasoning was that we weren't producing enough engineers to be able to satisfy their need in that area. But that we were producing plenty of very good people that could work, that could do out of our two-year institutions, that could do some of the technical work that they created there. And I thought that was instructive about some of the challenges that we faced 15 years ago, and I imagine we still do. But I personally think skilled labor follows, because I'd probably get fired as a CEO of a company if I said, I'm going to go down to South Carolina and we need 5,000 employees, and I think they'll be able to produce them over time, but they don't have them now. I mean, it's just not the way they operate. They've got to be satisfied that they have a 10 or a 20-year plan to address employment needs. Roland.
What do you think the fact that we are a right-to-work state has affected our ability to attract industry?
Has affected our ability to track industry?
Yeah, to attract these big companies
Yeah.
like Boeing, BMW, large manufacturing.
Sure. Well, no doubt it's had a positive impact. They, particularly these large mega projects that, whether it's the steel industry or automotives or aerospace, they're looking for a favorable climate where they can have a direct relationship with labor rather than have an intermediary. So there's no doubt that it's had a positive impact in terms of our ability to attract, particularly large projects. You hear less about it with the smaller ones. I'm sure it has some impact there too, but particularly that's a screen that they often have on projects like the Boeing one or the BMW project. But the piece we don't get there, I get back to pivot, as wonderful as those projects are, what we don't always get with the Boeing and the BMW are the research pieces that are so critical, that have much higher paying jobs. And that's where we need to sort of pivot and say, okay, this is terrific what we've got here, but Boeing and BMW, can we move more research facilities down here, more of your research capacity? And so that we can take advantage of the things that can produce. Because it's not only what they do, it's the new ideas that they generate, not just for their product line, but they're often new ideas generated that do some terrific things in other automotive areas. I was in Nashville a month ago, and it's amazing what they've done in the healthcare industry. It started with HCA, and once HCA did very well, you had people that left HCA to form community health systems and a whole host of others, and just this incredible mushrooming of opportunity that came out of one healthcare giant. And it speaks volumes about what happens when you get smart people together that do something special in a particular area of the economy. And the people that leave there to form other businesses, whether they're competitive or otherwise, that transform a community. I mean, it's no longer just a country music town. It's a really special place that does a lot in healthcare and a host of other areas. Any other questions? If not, I'll hang around for a minute. Happy to do that. And if you did look at the website, I think it's pretty good actually, and hopefully you'll find some things of interest there.